we just couldn't understand what was going on.
Kerry?
I think our biggest flaw was that we saw the horses and we were like, well, they're going to obviously come and fight at some point, and we just completely ignored them and let them come in.
I think that we got obsessed by the battle in the middle. What we failed to do was to have any way of coping with the cavalry that came round the side.
I just thought, well, we haven't got enough blokes. We haven't got enough blokes to actually fight the blokes in front of us, let alone the cavalry.
Well, I felt all right about the middle, but not the cavalry. I couldn't see what we were going to do about that, and there will be an obvious answer. But
well, there was a wonderful moment, Dave, when you were just standing here, and then the battle was going horribly wrong. And if I may, I don't do impressions, but if I may, this is what you were doing.
Don't do it for very long.
Like that. Now, don't get me wrong, that's what I would have done in your position.
Bear in mind, we didn't have it. We were staring at a lot of blue and no red.
Dave was staring.
Do you know what? If we had to do that again, we'd do exactly the same thing. I can't see another way of doing it. And what we did was we got beaten by more blokes. I'd love to see how it's really done. Just love to.
How handy. Because do you remember back about 1400 years ago when you met our historical experts?
Oh, yeah.
And they went upstairs, they've been watching everything. All right, Eric and So, I'm sorry you had to see that.
It's all very sad. We might have to do without Socrates and possibly that Aeschylus as well. I think you've butchered them. Dave was thinking about the lives of his troops. All of those fathers and brothers out there, he didn't want to get killed. But the result of that was, what happened? You got him killed. Yeah?
For me, the problem started early. You should have realised that your only hope lay in two things. One, being aggressive, and two, preventing yourself being outflanked. And there's only one way to do that. That's to move on the Persians as quickly as possible with as broad a front as possible. Your troops are best at close quarter fighting. The Persians don't like it. And I remember at one stage you were talking about staying up on the hill and fighting a defensive battle, which would have been even more disastrous. But this was pretty disastrous.
The time when you should have been advancing on the enemy and forcing the enemy to react to you, taking the initiative against the enemy, what were you doing? You were doing a bit of a dance around the field. The problem was that when they actually hit you, Kez was not quite in line with Scott, and Kez's troops and Scott's troops provided ample opportunity for the Persians to come in and kill your people.
They came down off the hill, which was a good thing. They completely forgot about the cavalry. Now, Kerry pointed that out, and she's absolutely right. They forgot about the cavalry. But even if the cavalry hadn't been on this field, you would have lost that battle just against the Persian infantry.
You guys were not completely useless. One thing that you did do, and that Dave did, was appreciate the importance of the way that you were deployed. So you were understanding the requirements, you just weren't able to put it all together.
And on the plus side, all your troops eventually had the same fondness for the sea that you do, which is nice. Would you like to see how the battle was really fought?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I think we should.
Now, Miltiades, the Athenian general, knows he's got a problem, and his problem is that there are more Persian troops than there are Athenians. He has to keep his front as wide as possible to stop himself being outflanked. He takes a calculated risk. He leaves the center of his line relatively thin and reinforces the flanks. The theory behind this is that once the actual clash takes place, the flanks can drive in. No sooner do they see the Persian line than they begin to advance. Until they get to within 200 meters, they're advancing at a normal pace, and then they go into the double. This is the 200 meters that the actual Persians can fire their arrows, and they want to be in that killing zone for as little as possible, and they drive into the Persian army.
And the Persians are able to push forward, and in fact, they actually managed to punch through the Athenian center. And the Persians think they're doing okay, in spite of the fact that they're doing that close quarter fighting that they're not especially fond of.
And in many cases, when you've got two battle lines, that's a major advantage, and it often means you're going to win the battle. But the difference is the flanks are so powerful of the Athenians that they're actually able to drive into the middle, causing such panic that half the Persian army is actually moving towards the beach, and the other half is getting caught in a sort of pincer movement in between. And this is what the Greeks are good at: close quarter fighting with their swords and their spears, and they are wiping out the Persians.
So the Persians make a run for their ships, and the Persians are able to sail off, and they're going to head for Athens next.
Now, the problem the Athenians have got is that if the Persians get there before they can get their army back, or more importantly, before they can get word back to Athens that they've won this great victory, the fifth columnists within Athens, who are just waiting for a sign so that they can come out in rebellion and support the Persians and invite the Persians in, there's that danger that that will happen. So they've got to get word back to Athens. So what do? They choose the greatest runner in the Athenian army, Phidippides, a man who's already fought during the battle. He's pretty exhausted, but he has to go 26 miles. He manages it in 3 hours, which isn't bad. He gets word through to Athens. The internal rebellion is stopped and Athens is saved. Unfortunately for Phidippides, he's so exhausted, he collapses and dies later that day. But he becomes an Athenian martyr and he saves Athens.
The sacrifice of Phidippides will be immortalized in the most grueling endurance event, the Marathon Run. The Greeks had decimated their enemy at Marathon, slaughtering 7,000 Persian troops, while losing just 192 of their own men. Democratic Athens would flourish, and its artistic and philosophical legacy would fundamentally shape Western culture.
And so, unlike the Athenians in 490 BC, you had minute-by-minute satellite pictures of everything that was going on in the battlefield, and a giant screen on which you could see everything that was going on. And you lost.
Yeah.
Thanks for playing. Thank you.